Judith Owen, welcome to noise11.com. Great to have you here. Oh, well, on the other side of the world anyway, in New Orleans.
I'm completely on the other side of the world, but it's so good after a couple of attempts to do this. I'm so happy to talk with you. It's always nice to see your face, Paul.
You're looking lovely, and I hope you're feeling fabulous.
I am. I'm feeling really, really good. I just did my twice weekly show, Facebook Live show, which I very intelligently called For Fuck's Sake, FFS. So because I basically say that phrase, I think, every 5 to 10 minutes of every day. Pretty much.
It's a good title for your next album then.
It kind of is, For Fuck's Sake, FFS. Because basically, I'm living in America. I can't, it's locked down, all the rest of it. Well, it's not really, but I mean, everywhere else in the world who's intelligent know that it should be locked down, but I can't go home. I can't go back and see my family. I can't go to Britain. I can't go anywhere. And as you know, the last place I was Australia. That was the last actual gig that I did was at the Sydney Opera House. Can you believe that?
Well, I can believe it because it was meant to be in Melbourne, but we didn't quite get there, did we?
Didn't make it, and I had a horrible sneaking feeling as this thing kept creeping along, and as the news got worse and worse. It was sort of like, I'm not making it. I'm not going to make it to Melbourne, to all my lovely friends in Melbourne. But next time, next year, it's I hate to quote the greatness, but it is what it is ultimately. And the faster we stop behaving properly and acting like adults, the faster we can actually move forward. So just a little thing to remind us all of.
Yeah. Well, you've spent this COVID year in a fabulous way for fans with these live performances. You must be over the 60 mark by now with the number of performances you've done.
Yeah, I've been doing this show twice a week since I got back from Australia. So I'm 7 months into this, and I have to say it took until I got back here to New Orleans to actually do a live show. And I had my fabulous percussionist who you saw a little earlier, Pedro Segunda, is here with me, and the two of us. I think the word elated is an understatement of how it feels to actually play in front of live human beings. I mean, it was extraordinary, utterly extraordinary. And we're all so starved of it. All musicians are so desperate. I get to connect. I get to do this show. I get to actually see these names that I know. I have such a great connection. It's become quite a community, Paul, this show. And I know a lot of people rely on it as I do to get me through, to get that, to connect and to resonate, because that's really what music's about. I mean, that is what it's about. It is about sharing it, and it's about connecting. So I feel very, very grateful that I came, I had this idea and thought, well, I won't survive unless I find a platform and a way to perform and a way to see or feel, read, speak to an audience and them to speak to me. So it's a very different thing, I think, from what a lot of people are doing. I'm not streaming in a way that I'm looking at the back of a camera or the back of multiple cameras and talking to nothing. I've got this weird trick. I'm not alone. A couple of my friends I know do this, where I'm actually I'm looking at myself, and because I have an overactive imagination, I pretend that it's somebody, as in an audience. It's the audience. I am my audience. And then I can see all the comments flying up in front of me as people are writing to me. And I am answering them, speaking to them one-to-one. It's marvelous. So the conversation that I have always treasured and loved as a performer, because that really is what it is. It's about feeling the audience, interacting. It's a two-way conversation, and I still get that. So with that one simple trick, I've managed to I feel, create a very intimate platform where I can still have that incredible engagement at a time when, God knows, I need it. We all need it.
You've been curating some amazing music over these last 7 months with the performances. Tell me about, the process that you go through when you decide what you're going to perform for one of these shows.
Well, it started off that things became so weird in America so fast. I mean, and I know that every country has their own story, but from my perspective as a, what can I say? I always feel like I'm slightly an outsider because as a Brit, I have a different way of viewing things, I suppose. I'm the eternal tourist, I guess. No, I live here. This is my, this is where I live. And I have dual citizenship. So I vote in both America and Britain. I'm very proud to say, and glad to say. But as things were kicking off, it started with COVID, of course, and then, and then it became George Floyd being murdered, and then it was the Black Lives Matter, and then it was the protests, and then it was seeing what was going down in Italy, and it was the craziness of what was happening in this country, the denial, the calling it a hoax. I know you're Australia relate to that one, but they don't have to wear the masks, and it's a hoax, and it's not real, and it's just the flu, and who cares, and it doesn't matter. Every single day there was one more just absurdity that you had to get your head around. I mean, one of the great things I think is, it's not great, there's nothing great about COVID, but one of the silver linings, and there are silver linings, I believe, in a weird way, is how when you pick the scab of any society and you see what's underneath, when you lift the rock, sadly, what our great leader, the great orange one, has uncovered is that he's made it okay for people to feel like they don't have to have any civility or humility or manners. They can, like him, I think there's a certain admiration for somebody who does whatever the hell they want and gets away with it and bullies their way through life. And I think there's a lot of people that really regard that highly. Well, I see this, and I see all the Karens, and I see the behavior and the white supremacists, and I think it's deplorable. And what I did see, in the Black Lives Matter situation with George Floyd, is this has been going on forever. This is America. America is built on a terrible legacy, and that is slavery. And if you don't face it, if you don't deal with it, if you don't actually face what this thing is, then you will never improve the situation. If you don't face this, if you don't deal with it properly, it will continue. And I think that because of COVID, people got to that boiling point, so when somebody saw a man being murdered by the police and they filmed it, and it was at that point where people had enough and they couldn't bear seeing one more atrocity, and because life is already so strange and terrifying. And I think it has been an unmasking of the underbelly of society as far as, really, this is a very racist country. And this is a country that is very much about the have and have-nots, and is filled with millions of really great people and great minds and true humanity. But there is a certain part of this country and a certain way of thinking in this country, I believe, where it is that, those that have should have more and more and more, and those who haven't should have less and less. And I don't want, I as somebody that votes and as an American citizen, I don't want that. I don't want to live in a world like that. I want it to be a place where people have an equal playing field. People get opportunity, get a chance, they're looked after, that we think about the future, that we invest in the future. We invest in human beings, like we should be investing in the planet and taking care of everything around us. And so with every single thing I saw, I know this is a long answer to a short question, I couldn't stop writing. And I have some, again, other friends who will feel the same way as me. I think if you're somebody that writes about what you see around you, and I am a voyeur, I couldn't not write. It was one thing after another, and it made my blood boil, and it made me feel that, one of the most important songs on this EP that came from the here and now, that came from all the songs that I wrote for FFS, for fuck's sake, for my shows, is a song called Fork in the Road. Because, as we plummet towards November 3rd, I can quite safely say that this is probably the most important decision. This is the most important time in American history, rather that has been for a very, very long time, because we are at a fork in the road. We're at a crossroads, we're at a fork. We can decide to continue not caring and giving a shit about anybody else, except if we're okay, and that's great. Wonderful.
Living in the New Orleans community there, you've got an amazing music community, as we have here in Melbourne. Have you had the opportunity to actually get out and perform in your hometown while you've been locked down this COVID year?
No, I did the first performance last week, and I'm about to do one, and that was on a porch in Algiers Point across the river. And people, I've never seen more people in my life who'd out in their deck chairs, separated, get distanced in a park, doing the right thing, masked, doing all the right things, and us way back across the street in a porch. And I was delirious with joy, delirious. Pedro and I, and Harry played bass. It was remarkable. We were just beside ourselves. I haven't felt that full, and I haven't felt that good since I was in Australia playing at Port Fairy and the Sydney Opera House, and I'm doing another one. I'm doing another one Tuesday. I'm doing another one tomorrow, and that's uptown. But honestly, the saddest thing about being here, Paul, the birthplace of jazz, the place I chose to live, because the music. Talk about inspirational. You can't go out. You can't be in the street without hearing music. It is in its blood. It's life's breath. It's the music, the food, the architecture. It's such an incredible place to be a musician. And the hardest thing about being here right now is that there is nowhere to play. You cannot play. It's a miserable, terrible time for the musicians. They're really struggling. These small venue owners are struggling horrendously, because if you own the building, you're okay. If you're paying rent, you're still paying rent for an empty club. So I'm very worried. I'm worried, like all places where musicians live a hand-to-mouth existence as they do here. I'm worried for them. And so, whenever I get an opportunity, last night, went over to Frenchman Street, which is a great music street, one of the main music streets, and went to see an amazing trumpet player, really part of the fabric of this place, Kermit Ruffins, playing trumpet and doing a live stream show in an empty club, of course, with us, a couple people way in the back wearing our masks, who were just allowed to come in just because we know them, and we're wanting to keep our distance, and it's wonderful that they're doing that. But I tell you, it also makes you really sad, because that feeling of not having an audience, of not having that connection, watching somebody perform and they're being like, it's really fucking brutal. So, I mean, the good news about this place is that the weather is such that it will continue to be pretty nice and benign until up to Christmas and during Christmas. And hopefully there will be more and more outdoor events, outdoor shows. I certainly will be doing as many as I possibly can, because it's impossible to put into words how much I've missed it. It's impossible. Mm. But it's impossible, and also how people have much people in this city who are so used to seeing music all the time, used to just going out every night after dinner and seeing somebody incredible in a local club, or like I said, in the street. But something about this place is so spectacular, I have to say. As I'm leaving last night, DBA, to watch this streaming, I hear this rapturous applause as we leave, as Pedro and I leave, and it's typical wraparound house, building at the end of the street, and there's a beautiful balcony up above. And upstairs, there's a pianist and an opera singer, and they are doing German Lieder to a whole bunch of people who, again, are like distancing. They've got their lounge chairs out. They've got their, their little deck chairs and everything. They're out in the middle of the street. This is at night. It is so typical of this place. And bad things happen all the time here, as you know. There have been tragedies here constantly, and still you cannot defeat, I think, the musical and cultural spirit. The personality of the city moves on, but it worries me. It does. It worries me.
Tell me about the time you and Harry actually decided to move to New Orleans.
Yeah, well, I've lived between America and London, and I've always gone back and forth and done my work between, in Europe and in America. But we were in California, we were in LA because that's where Harry's from, and that's where he works primarily. And we came down here for Jazz Fest, and I literally got off the plane, came to the French Quarter, checked into the hotel, and went out into the French Quarter and turned to Harry and said, "Why the fuck don't we live here?" I'm not joking. I mean, this is exactly what happened. And then when I actually went to Jazz Fest itself and drank that in and let that soak in, I was just like, oh my God. Because it's not just music. It's, I've met novelists and artists and painters and architects and human rights lawyers and judges and scientists, and I mean it goes on and on and on. But what we all have in common, I suppose, is that New Orleans attracts kind of eccentric people who are outside of the norm, maybe people who have this. They're not like your straight and narrow people. It's always attracted people who are slightly, outsiders, and it attracts artists, and it attracts attracts people who want a more European flavored lifestyle where food is the king, and long and intense dinners and cuisine is very, very important, and history is really important, and architecture is very important, and you care about the fact that you're in a very old place. And I live in the French Quarter, and it's sort of like, it's magnificent feeling where you feel like you're in some weird sort of, I don't know, kind of French Caribbean strangeness, which is just so intoxicating. And it's the least, it doesn't feel like you're in America. But as a pianist, I'm sitting here at my marvelous piano, the very piano that I recorded 7 of my albums on in Party Studios. Let me tell you a good story about this as to why this place is so special. And what I was about to say is, in New Orleans, piano is king. I mean, that's right there. If you're talking about great piano players, whatever, Professor Longhair, Booker, Dr. John Cleary, my mate, who I'm seeing later tonight. It's sort of like piano's king. And for someone like me, that means a lot. That means a lot. Because in the rest of the world, it tends to be, dominated by guitar ultimately, but not here. It's such a part of it. But here's an example of New Orleans. So when we first came here, we met these 2 wonderful people, these New Yorkers who'd moved down here, and I loved them, and they were wonderful. I loved him, and I knew he did something in music, but I didn't know really what, and we just became friends, and they were helping us, figure out like how to get a condo here, a little place to live, because we had a tiny place here for the longest time when we weren't here full time. Took me 2 years to realize. And I grew up needing to hear, always listening to Stevie Wonder on a daily basis, because if I didn't, I think I wouldn't have survived. Stevie Wonder's got me through life, especially songs in the key of life. Took me 2 years to realize that the man that I liked so much, who was my friend, who's never really got into any more of how does this happen? Like I said, I knew he was something in music. So he was the engineer on the songs in the key of life. John Fishback. And then, so I find this out, then I feel like a complete bloody idiot. I didn't know this for all this time. So we end up working together in his studio, Party Studio, down in Bywater, just like minutes from here. I recorded all the songs on this amazing piano. And, this is a piano that Dr. John and all these amazing people have recorded on. But ultimately, that's what I mean about New Orleans. It attracts people from all walks of life. But it attracts people who have the same sensibilities, I suppose. And I guess the thing that might have saved New Orleans in many ways is the fact that music is so pure. Kids grow up, families grow up. The kids learn to play, the trumpet, and and like somebody like Trombone Shorty or something like that, the trombone, or to be in a street band, or be to, drum or whatever, or play the piano, whatever it might be. Music is inherently just, again, it's like in the DNA. And so people don't become musicians here because they want to make a deal or get a huge record deal or have a number one hit. Or, I mean, don't get me wrong, everybody wants to earn a living and be able to live and be a musician, but they have a very different attitude towards being a musician. And it's not about, I want to be a star, I want a number one hit. It's not that. It's about just the pure need and love of music.
There's been some new music this year, not a lot. I thought there was going to be another covers album, but there have been a couple of covers, haven't there? You've done Earth, Wind and Fire and September, and people should get on to their streaming service and listen to their song. It's just a magnificent Torch version.
Well, thank you. It's, I love Earth, Wind and Fire so much, and I saw them at Jazz Fest one year, and I thought the whole stage was going to collapse. Everybody was jumping up and down like their lives depended upon it. And so when September started, I literally thought it was going to collapse. We were jumping up and down so much. But I thought, how I love to turn music on its head and find my own story in it. And I was reading the lyrics and thinking, what does this mean? If it, because it's about looking back on summer and the joy of it and the delight of all that love and fun and happiness. And I thought, hang on a second, September is autumn, and wouldn't it be an interesting Torch song, as from the point of view of all of us who've ever been in a very, very long, relationship and happy in their long relationship and loving it, but also remembering when, you've gone into that love, yes, changes and it gets deeper and richer, but then you also sometimes remember the beginning of it when it was all fireworks and excitement and thrill. And there's also that moment where you're just kind of like, just sort of like missing that, because that's of course what we all do and what we all go through in relationships. And that can't last forever, that you just combust and it would be over. But ultimately that's the sense, that's the meaning behind my version. And that's why it took such a yearning, emotional, as you say, Torch song sound to it, because that really is it. And before that, I did my version of Hold My Hand by Jess, Glynn, where that was absolutely straight. It just sounds like a hymn. It sounds like some absolute hymn. And I did that as well because of the situation we were in COVID, as far as the necessity to extend the metaphorical hand. That you couldn't do it for real, but to extend that kindness and support for other human beings. Otherwise, none of us would get through this. I mean, it's not possible without that kindness. So I know that later on this year, I'll be gearing up probably to release the beginning of next year, I should think, another large collection, which will be half originals and half covers. And I'm actually going into the studio I think it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to mix a few more of the songs for that. So that will be called Both Things Are True, because that's the other line that I say a lot in my life, which is both things are true, and that's how I see everything. That's how I write. That's what I write about, and that's purely the fact that we're not one thing, we're many things, and life can be dreadful and wonderful at exactly the same time, and usually is.
Well, I hope we will see you on the road. I don't know about internationally. We might not see you down here till 2022, the way it's going. But at least, get out, do some gigs, give us new music, and keep doing those shows. We've been really enjoying them.
You, Paul, so good to speak with you. Sorry I couldn't play today. I know it would sound wretched, but you've got all the music. So I thank you for your time, and it's just great to see you.